In the winter of 2019, a chilling account emerged from Beijing University that would forever change how students view dormitory life. This terrifying story spread like wildfire across Chinese social media, shared in hushed whispers in lecture halls and late-night group chats. Tonight, I bring you the complete account of what happened in room 302 of the Mingda dormitory complex, a story so disturbing it forced the university to permanently seal the room. The tale begins with Li Wei, a second-year engineering student whose family lived in a small farming village outside Beijing. Like countless other students, Li Wei faced the crushing reality of big city living costs. His family could barely afford his tuition, let alone the expensive dormitory fees. The university standard dormitories cost 8,000 yuan per semester, money his family simply didn't have. Li Wei had spent weeks sleeping on friends' floors and in library corners, desperately searching for affordable housing. Every decent place was either full, too expensive, or too far from campus. He had nearly given up hope when desperation led him to explore options he would normally never consider. The Mingda dormitory complex sat on the older side of campus, built in the 1960s with grey concrete facade and narrow windows that gave it an almost prison-like appearance. Most students avoided living there, preferring the newer dormitories even if they cost significantly more. It was during one desperate apartment hunting expedition that Li Wei first heard about room 302. He was sitting in the university's housing office when an elderly woman behind the desk quietly approached him. "Young man," she said in a low voice, glancing around nervously, "there might be one option, room 302 in Mingda complex. It's been empty for months. The rent is only 2,000 yuan per semester." Li Wei's eyes lit up. That was less than a quarter of what other dormitories charged. "What's wrong with it?" he asked, suspicious. The woman's expression darkened. "Nothing's wrong with the room itself. It's just, previous tenants haven't stayed long. But if you're interested, I can arrange a viewing tomorrow." The next morning, Li Wei met the woman Mrs. Chen outside the Mingda complex. As they climbed to the third floor, he noticed how quiet the building was. Even in mid-afternoon, there were no signs of student life. Room 302 was at the end of a long, dimly lit corridor. Mrs. Chen fumbled with keys before finding the right one. The lock was stiff, and the door creaked loudly as it opened. Inside, the room was surprisingly spacious and well-maintained. It had everything a student could need: a desk, bed, wardrobe, and even a private bathroom. Large windows faced north, offering a view of the campus courtyard. The previous tenant left suddenly, Mrs. Chen explained, avoiding Li Wei's eyes. "Middle of the semester?" Said it wasn't suitable. She gestured around. "You could move in tomorrow if you want." Li Wei walked around, checking for problems. The walls were recently painted, the floor clean, no moisture damage or pests. For 2,000 yuan per semester, it was incredible. "I'll take it," he said without hesitation. That Friday evening, Li Wei moved into room 302. As he unpacked, he felt genuinely optimistic for the first time in weeks. The first thing he noticed was how cold the room felt despite central heating. The second was a small red envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a note. "Welcome to room 302. I hope you enjoy your stay. Be careful of the dreams. A concerned friend." Li Wei stared at the note, puzzled. He crumpled it up and threw it away, dismissing it as a prank. He fell asleep that first night feeling grateful and hopeful. He had no idea that his real nightmare was just beginning. Chapter 1. First Encounters. Li Wei's first night passed peacefully, and he woke feeling more rested than he had in weeks. The morning sunlight made the room feel warm and inviting. He had breakfast and headed to lectures, excited about having a proper place to return to. It wasn't until his third night that things began to feel different. Li Wei was studying late for a calculus exam when he first heard soft tapping from somewhere within the walls. At first, he assumed it was pipes or the old heating system. But the tapping had a rhythm: 3 quick taps, 2 slow ones, then silence for exactly 10 seconds before repeating. Li Wei tried to ignore it and focus on his textbook, but the sound was strangely hypnotic. After 20 minutes, it stopped suddenly. The next morning, Li Wei mentioned the noise to Zhang Ming, a friendly student in room 305. Zhang Ming was in his final year studying literature and had lived in Mingda complex for almost 2 years. "Oh, you're in 302, Zhang Ming said, his expression immediately changing. "How is it so far?" "Fine," Li Wei replied, puzzled. "Why? Is there something I should know?" Zhang Ming glanced around nervously. "Look, I don't want to scare you with rumors, but that room has a reputation. previous students didn't last long. What kind of reputation? Strange things, noises, cold spots, students having nightmares every night. The last girl who lived there, Mei Lin, she was there only 3 weeks before she left very suddenly. Middle of the night, never came back for her things. Li Wei laughed, trying to hide his unease. Come on, you don't believe in ghost stories, do you? We're university students, not superstitious villagers. Jiang Ming shrugged. I'm just telling you what I've observed. Maybe you'll be different. That night, Li Wei lay in bed thinking about Jiang Ming's words. As he was drifting off, the tapping started again. Same rhythm, same duration, same sudden stop. This time, Li Wei decided to investigate. He followed the sound to the wall behind his desk. Pressing his ear against it, the tapping was definitely coming from inside the wall. Between the taps, he could swear he heard whispered words in a language he couldn't understand. When he pulled back, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. In the corner where wall met floor, someone had scratched marks into the paint, dozens of small vertical lines grouped in sets of 5, like tally marks. There were 127 marks total. During lunch break, Li Wei went to the university library and searched through old student newspapers for any mention of incidents in Mingde complex. What he found made his blood run cold. 3 years ago, there had been an article about Wang Fei found in room 302 in severe psychological distress. He had barricaded himself in the room, talking to someone who wasn't there, and was hospitalized for a nervous breakdown. 2 years before that, Liu Xiang had complained about persecution by unseen forces in room 302. He had moved out after 6 weeks, forfeiting his entire semester's rent. But the third article terrified Li Wei most. From 5 years ago, Mei Lin, a 19-year-old freshman studying art history, was found deceased in room 302 of Mingde complex early Tuesday morning. University officials report natural causes, though circumstances remain under investigation. She had been living alone for approximately 3 weeks. Li Wei's hands shook as he read. Mei Lin, same name Jiang Ming mentioned. But Jiang Ming said she left suddenly, not that she died. Why would he lie? That evening, Li Wei confronted Jiang Ming about the discrepancy. Jiang Ming's face went pale. The truth is, we don't know what really happened, Jiang Ming said quietly. Official story was natural causes, but there were rumors. Students on the 3rd floor heard screaming from her room the night she died, screaming that lasted hours, but when security checked, her door was locked from inside and everything was quiet. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I hoped maybe it was coincidence, maybe you'd be fine. Jiang Ming looked genuinely worried. But Li Wei, if you experience anything strange, anything at all, just leave. Find somewhere else to live. That night, Li Wei stared at the ceiling, mind racing. He thought about Mei Lin, alone in this room, experiencing what? Had she heard the tapping? Made those tally marks? As if summoned by his thoughts, the tapping began again. But this time it was different, frantic, urgent. And between the taps, he could clearly hear something that made his heart stop. Crying, soft, heartbroken sobbing coming from inside the walls. Li Wei sat up, every nerve alert. The crying continued for several minutes, occasionally interrupted by muffled words in a female voice. He couldn't make out what she was saying, but the tone was desperate pleading. Then everything stopped. The room fell silent except for Li Wei's rapid breathing and thundering heartbeat. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at his desk with all lights on, staring at the wall. As dawn broke, Li Wei made a decision. He wasn't going to run. He needed to understand what was happening and find out the truth about Mei Lin. Whatever force was in this room, he was going to face it. Chapter 2. The Truth About Mei Lin. Li Wei spent the next several days researching everything about Mei Lin and room 302's history. What he discovered painted a disturbing picture of a young woman whose life had been cut short under circumstances far more sinister than the university admitted. Mei Lin Chen had been 18 when she started at Beijing University, a promising art history student from a small town in Hunan province. Like Li Wei, she struggled financially and requested the cheapest accommodation available. Her transfer to room 302 had been approved unusually quickly within just 2 days, highly irregular for university housing. Li Wei discovered that Mei Lin had been an active student journalist. Her final published article, written a week before her death, was about corruption in university housing allocations and mysterious financial irregularities in dormitory management. The more Li Wei learned, the more convinced he became that Mei Lin's death hadn't been coincidental. Someone had wanted her silenced, and room 302 had been the perfect isolated location. His research was interrupted on the 7th night by the most terrifying encounter yet. Li Wei was working late when the temperature suddenly dropped dramatically. His breath became visible and frost formed on the windows despite the heating system running full capacity. Then he saw her. A figure materialized at the foot of his bed, a young woman in a red dress, but seeing her was far more terrifying than any description could convey. Mei Lin appeared exactly as she would have in life, except for her eyes. Where her eyes should have been were hollow, dark sockets that seemed to absorb light. Her mouth moved silently, as if trying to speak but no sound could escape. Li Wei tried to move but found himself completely paralyzed. He could only watch as Mei Lin raised one translucent hand and pointed directly at him, then toward the wall with the tally marks. The encounter lasted 30 seconds but felt like hours. When Mei Lin faded, the temperature returned to normal and Li Wei could move again. He immediately ran to the wall she had pointed toward. In the dim light, he saw new marks beside the original tallies, fresh scratches in the paint that definitely hadn't been there before. But these weren't counting marks, they were Chinese characters, scratched frantically. Bonjuwo. Help me. Jensong, truth. Tashalawo. He killed me. Below them, exactly 13 new tally marks had appeared. The next morning, Li Wei told Jiang Ming everything. Jiang Ming listened with growing alarm. Li Wei, you need to leave immediately? Jiang Ming said, this isn't just residual haunting. She's trying to communicate with you specifically. That's never happened with previous residents. But what if she needs my help? What if she's trying to tell me something important about how she died? Despite Jiang Ming's warnings, Li Wei couldn't abandon room 302. He felt a growing connection to Mei Lin's spirit and responsibility to help her find peace. That evening, Li Wei decided to try communicating directly. He set up his laptop to record and prepared questions written on paper. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the room grew cold and Mei Lin appeared. This time, she looked more solid, more real. Her hollow eyes seemed to focus on Li Wei, and when he held up his first question, "Who killed you?" she nodded and pointed toward his laptop. Li Wei looked at the screen and gasped. Words were appearing in his word processor, typed by invisible fingers. Professor Wang Zhenming. He was taking bribes from construction companies. I found evidence. He couldn't let me publish it. Li Wei's blood ran cold. Professor Wang Zhenming was head of the university's infrastructure and housing department, the same department that managed dormitory assignments. More words appeared. He put something in my tea, poison, made it look like heart failure, but I fought. I scratched the evidence into the wall before I died. Using his phone's flashlight, Li Wei examined the wall more carefully. Underneath layers of paint, there were more scratched characters. Someone had painted over Mei Lin's original message, but the deep scratches were still visible. Using a coin, Li Wei scraped away paint and revealed Mei Lin's final message. Wang Zhenming 杀了我，贿赂证据在我电脑里. Wang Zhenming killed me. Bribery evidence is in my computer. New words appeared on his laptop. My laptop, they never found it, hidden in the ventilation shaft. The truth is still there. Following Mei Lin's guidance, Li Wei examined the ventilation grate in the corner. Using a knife, he pried it open. Inside, wrapped in plastic bags, was Mei Lin's laptop and documents. Despite being hidden for 5 years, the laptop powered on. The desktop contained folders with financial records, emails, and photographic evidence of a massive corruption scheme involving Professor Wang Zhenming and construction companies. Mei Lin had discovered Wang Zhenming taking bribes worth millions of yuan in exchange for awarding university construction contracts. Her final email was a draft article titled "The Price of Silence: Corruption in University Infrastructure Projects." She never had the chance to send it. As Li Wei read through the evidence, he understood why Mei Lin's spirit couldn't rest. She had died trying to expose the truth, and her killer had never faced justice. Now Li Wei had the power to finish what Mei Lin started. The question was, would he have the courage to use it? Chapter 3. The Final Reckoning. Li Wei knew going public with Mei Lin's evidence would put him in serious danger, but he couldn't stay silent. Over the next 2 days, he copied all files to secure cloud storage and prepared a comprehensive article exposing Professor Wang Zhenming's corruption. However, on the 3rd night after his discovery, Li Wei learned that the supernatural forces in room 302 were far more dangerous than he had understood. He was working late when the room filled with a malevolent presence unlike anything before. The temperature became absolutely frigid, causing ice to form on every surface. But this time, it wasn't Mei Lin who appeared. A dark, shadowy figure materialized near the doortel, imposing, radiating pure hatred. Li Wei immediately recognized him from faculty photos. Professor Wang Zhenming. But this wasn't the living professor, this was something far worse. "You stupid boy," the shadow spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "Did you think you could expose me without consequences?" Li Wei tried to move but found himself frozen by an invisible force. The shadow began moving closer, and with each step, the oppressive presence grew stronger. "I killed that interfering girl 5 years ago, and I'll kill you too if you don't destroy that evidence immediately," the shadow continued. "I have friends in very high places." Li Wei realized with horror that Professor Wang Zhenming wasn't just corrupt there, was connected to something much darker. The supernatural presence wasn't just Mei Lin's spirit, it was a vortex of negative energy created by years of violence and cover-ups. "Mei Lin wasn't my first victim," Wang Zhenming's shadow hissed. "This room has been my private execution chamber for over a decade. Students who ask too many questions all end up here eventually." The shadow gestured toward the walls, and Li Wei watched in terror as more tally marks appeared, hundreds of them, covering every surface. Each mark represented a day of suffering for someone who had died in this room. "How many?" Li Wei whispered. "Mei Lin was number 7, the shadow replied with satisfaction. "You'll be number 8. The invisible force holding Li Wei began to tighten, making it difficult to breathe. He could feel his life energy being drained away, just as it must have been for all previous victims. But then, just as consciousness was slipping away, another presence entered the room. Mei Lin materialized between Li Wei and the shadow, but she looked different now. Instead of the hollow-eyed spectre, she appeared radiant and powerful, surrounded by brilliant white light that pushed back the darkness. "No more," Mei Lin said, her voice clear and strong for the first time. "Your reign of terror ends tonight." Behind Mei Lin, other figures began appearing, 6 other students, all young people who had died in room 302. Together, they formed a barrier of light that completely surrounded Wang Zhenming's shadow. "You can't stop me," the shadow snarled. "I have too much power, too many connections." "Your power was built on secrecy and fear," Mei Lin replied. "But he's going to tell our story, all of our stories. Once the truth is known, you'll have no power left." The confrontation reached a crescendo of supernatural energy that shook the entire building. Li Wei watched as the shadow of Wang Zhenming was gradually overwhelmed by the combined force of his victim's spirits, his dark presence dissolving until nothing remained. As the shadow disappeared, the oppressive atmosphere lifted completely. The temperature returned to normal, and Li Wei could move freely again. Mei Lin approached him, looking peaceful for the first time. "Thank you," she said softly. "You gave us the voice we needed to find justice. Our stories will finally be told." "What happened to Professor Wang Zhenming in real life?" Li Wei asked. "Heart attack, 3 years ago," Mei Lin replied. "But his network of corruption is still active. Publishing our evidence will expose all of them." One by one, the spirits began to fade away, finally able to find peace now that their story would be told. Mei Lin was the last to go. "The room will be safe now," she promised. "Other students can live here without fear. We're finally free." As dawn broke on Li Wei's final morning in room 302, he completed Mei Lin's article and submitted it to the university newspaper, major news outlets, and anti-corruption authorities. Within hours, the story exploded across Chinese social media. The evidence led to arrests of multiple university officials and construction company executives. The university was forced to acknowledge the deaths in room 302 and implement new safety measures. Li Wei moved out that same day, not from fear the room felt clean and peaceful now, but because his work there was done. 6 months later, a memorial plaque was installed outside room 302 honoring Mei Lin Chen and the other students who had lost their lives. The room was converted into a study center named the Mei Lin Center for Investigative Journalism. Li Wei became an investigative journalist himself, inspired by Mei Lin's courage. He never forgot the lessons learned in room 302, that sometimes the dead need the living to speak for them, and that the most powerful force against evil is refusing to stay silent. Room 302 is no longer haunted, but it serves as a reminder that in the pursuit of truth and justice, even death cannot silence those who fight for what is right.